This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. It's so great to see so many faces on the screen. Thank you for putting your video on. I'm actually going to be co-hosting this with our chair of the Committee on Women in the Legal Profession, Patty Galindo. So I'm going to turn it over to her to do the welcomes, and then I'll take it from there.
Great. Thanks, Deanza. Hi, everyone. I'm equally glad to see faces. Thanks, everyone, for joining. I know this is kind of a crazy Monday after a long holiday, but I'm glad you guys are taking a little bit of time out and just connecting with us, because our topic today, I think, is kind of interesting. So for those of us that haven't joined before, this is our second time. This is our Law Mom Chats. Law Mom is a hashtag we created for the Committee on Women in the Legal Profession to talk about challenges being a lawyer and parenting. So we decided to do these lunchtime chats on Mondays to try to just get people motivated and connected and try to give us some helpful hints, maybe, and tools and tips to get through this kind of crazy time in our lives. So as Deanza said, my name is Patricia Galindo. I'm one of the co-chairs this year for the Committee on Women, so welcome, everyone. So today our topic is a quarantine bubble. Is this a law mom's, let's see, the secret to a law mom's sanity? And some of you might think, okay, what is a quarantine bubble? So what we're going to talk about a little bit today is there's been a new term created for a quarantine bubble. It's also called a social bubble or a pod. And it's something that Deanza and I stumbled upon kind of by accident, out of necessity. So for those of you that don't know, offline, we're pretty good friends, and we hang out with a couple other women lawyers in Albuquerque. And you know, we can talk about that a little bit more. We started this, we got together. There was the two of us and another friend of ours. And I think we were talking about that, Deanza. We got together probably in May. We'll talk a little bit about how that happened informally, but since we've done that, we've learned now that this is actually like a movement. This is something that's happening. But before we get started, I just want to talk about, I looked at some articles before, you know, doing some research for this topic. And a lot of the articles talk about being quarantined, and whether we're working or isolating, whatever we're doing, it's taking a mental toll on all of us. And one of those things that I'm missing on, I'm working from home, is any kind of social interaction. I love working from home. It's a blessing, but also a curse. I love my kids, I love my husband, but you know what? It's just, I'm missing just that chit chat. You know, sometimes I think the things we used to complain about, oh, so-and-so's in the hall, they're going to talk to me about how my day went, I'm really busy. Well, sometimes I'm just like, gosh, I wish somebody would ask me, how's my day going? I could just see somebody. So seeing your faces is so great. Seeing somebody outside of my little family would be great. But the mental health toll is really quite significant. And so when we're talking about these bubbles, it's a way to try to balance that out. So Deanza, I know that I've talked a little bit about me and you and how we've been meeting up in person. But why don't you tell us a little bit, though, Deanza, about why you chose? And so Deanza is our host, actually. For our series of talks, we have 4 different hosts on our committee that are going to be doing topics, and this is one that she chose. So I guess before we go any further, I should ask Deanza, why did you choose to pick the quarantine bubble as our topic for today's Law Mom Chat?
Well, good question. So part of the reason we wanted to do this is to give all of us some strategies of how to deal with this and how to cope and how some of us are managing. So we wanted this to be useful, not only as a time just to kind of get to know each other as a sort of a safe space. We call it healthy commiserating. And I would say, feel free to like drop questions in the chat or just do that. Just we'll make this as interactive as possible. But one of the things I wanted to share with you guys is that this notion of having a quarantine bubble has literally saved my sanity over the last few months, and I highly, highly recommend it. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the evolution of it and what it really means, because as lawyers, we approach all of these things a little bit differently than everyone else. And there are some very specific things I would recommend in doing this, but the payoff is that it could completely, I think, meet the needs that so many of us have. Some of us are more extroverted than others, but that need for adult time, that intellectual conversation, and that sort of break from, you know, working and then childcare and having some adult time is really, really important. And I have to say, this has been one of the best things about quarantine so far. And I wanted to give it to you as a strategy and as a technique that you could use in your personal and professional life. So it all started when we decided that we needed to see each other after the first few weeks of sort of like our head spinning, and we set up those Zoom calls. I mean, how many of you guys have been on a Zoom happy hour, right? Well, I found those to be okay, but I didn't love it. I'll be honest. I didn't. It was nice to see everybody, but I missed that like face to face, and there was just something missing, right? And so finally, we decided to do what I'm calling the stage 1 quarantine bubble, which is a couple of friends said, well, what if we just met outside in one of our backyards? We'll come through the side gate, we'll go to the back, we'll each bring our own food, we'll sit 6 feet apart, and this is a group of female attorneys, right? And let's just have a conversation that way. And then we were worried about using each other's restrooms. I mean, it was like highly intense scrutiny kind of thing. And that worked. And actually, it was pretty good initially on. But as things have moved forward, and frankly, and I'm going to give you my 2 cents, I don't think schools are going to reopen in the fall. I know we're prepping for that in the next month or so. Given where things are at, I'm calling it now. I think we need to really be thinking strategically about what we're going to be doing in the fall, because I don't think it's going to look like how they're even planning it right now. So these types of coping mechanisms are even going to be more important. So the next stage of the quarantine bubble is a little bit more intense, and it's a strategy I wanted to share with you. So what a quarantine bubble is essentially a group of friends that, and the way we've done it is a little bit different than everyone else. So right now I'm actually coming to you live from Farmington, New Mexico. We're all in some sort of bubble, right? Like with our immediate family or our friends or our children. I've been kind of back and forth with my parents here in Farmington. And this is somewhat of a quarantine bubble, but it's not meeting all of my needs. Having that sort of girlfriend interaction is really important. So the first thing you have to determine in doing this is determining sort of what your risk is. There are a few of you on the phone that I know are immune compromised, and it just doesn't make sense to be around anybody. Some of you may have children at home, or you're caring for elderly parents, and you have to determine your risk. I mean, I think that's the first part. And there was a really great analogy. Like, we have to kind of, because in dealing with other people in the quarantine bubble, it's sort of like a contract, right? Like, we have to think about our business law background. It's sort of a contract with other people. And in doing it, you have to first determine your risk if you should even be doing this, because it's ultimately your decision. The next thing is you have to set the parameters, which are sort of like the terms, right? So, okay, who's allowed to come into, so the way we've done it is there's a group of us that say, okay, we're going to be committed to seeing each other maybe once every 2 weeks in person, ideally in an outdoor situation. We've kind of got a little bit more relaxed, like on the food and that kind of thing, but allowing ourselves to come together in person and to either share food or just talk or whatever it may be. I'm telling you, but this has been what I have been living for, are those times, right, where we get together and we can just talk and feel a little bit normal. And it's been so good for my mental health. So you've got to set the parameters. Okay, well, when we're not here, if we've been exposed to anybody, if we've been, have we been following the protocols? What's our exposure for our children? Is our significant other out working in an essential job? I mean, all of those things have to be done up front. And one of the most important things about it is ongoing communication. So a friend of ours who we had been quarantining with in this bubble, we were doing this sort of meet and greet, and we were kind of rotating it. Well, they unexpectedly invited a couple people that we didn't know were invited. And that broke all the parameters and the protocols of the bubble, right? So having done that up front, I think it would be really useful. But I'm telling you, this could be a really excellent tool for you to use from now until the end of the year. So I just wanted to put that out as a strategy. I don't know how many of you guys are already doing this. I mean, maybe doing it on different types of levels, but it could be something that meets the needs that I have, at least for social interaction, to be in person with people that are outside of my immediate family, and helps me feel a little bit sane. And frankly, if I'm staring down life like this for the next 6 months, having a type of arrangement like this could be really, really important. So with that, I'll turn it back to Patty. And I just want to and then we also wanted to sort of hear from you too about what some strategies you have for dealing with this and what you think has worked for you and for your colleagues and for your family.
All right.
Patty?
Well, great. Thanks, Danza. And if I could just add a couple of things for those of you that aren't familiar with this, I think some of the things that we've talked about is this is really trying to figure out who you're going to hang out with. And it goes further than just friends. So as I mentioned before, Deanza and I have a group of girlfriends that are lawyers that we've been hanging out with for, gosh, years and years. And it's really interesting because you start looking at, just like in society, there's people that are ultra conservative, what they're comfortable with, and people that are very liberal and don't really care. And it's really, it takes your friendships or your acquaintances to a different level. You have to ask those hard questions. And one of the things that Deanza was talking about is when you ask those questions, either, you know, everyone has to know that it's not judgy. We're just trying to figure out, what is your exposure in the community? What are you doing? My family, I'm at home almost all the time with my kids. Working from home, I go out once a week to get groceries. Deanza, on the other hand, has talked to me. She's like, hey, I go out to eat quite often with my daughter. You know, she might be doing more, having more social contacts. And then the other groups of friends of ours are varying also as well. So we've had some people that don't feel comfortable whatsoever. And I've always, if you're reaching out to people, it's always important, I think, to say, I totally respect that. I'm fine with that. Don't take it as a slight. And if you're turned away from a bubble, I think that's another thing I've read about. That could really feel like high school, right? Like your feelings are hurt. But it's just that the people you're trying to connect with that maybe you normally get along with, maybe you all don't have the same risks. And that's what's really important. So it's kind of like, I feel like it's kind of a high school thing, trying to find your little group who shares your beliefs and who is social distancing or whatever it is that you all are choosing to do equal to yours. You don't want to be, if you're taking all these precautions, you don't want to hang out with somebody that's like, I'll just say this, you know, somebody that's younger, maybe doesn't have any parents that they're watching, and is, I'm just pretending, going out to the bars. There's no bars in Albuquerque, but anyway, they're open or just doing stuff and are really every day contacting lots of people, your risk will be elevated. So you kind of have to look at that, just do that and have those open conversations. One of the things that this article that I was reading about said is it's kind of like a business decision. How would you go enter into a contract, laying out the ground rules? So let's say if in our social bubble, I broke it this weekend, for example, which I didn't, but let's pretend I did, and all these people came over to my house or something, I should disclose that to my friends before we get together again. I should say, hey guys, this is what happened. And if anybody says, you know what, I'm not comfortable with you meeting up with us, why don't you wait 2 more weeks? I'd be like, okay, that's cool. It's being upfront and honest with everyone. But the other thing really quick, Deanza, I want to talk about is I think that there's 2 different types of social bubbles for us law moms. The one we're talking about, to be really clear, is Deanza and I individually, separate from our family. So it's like an individual one, right?
This is for adults. Adult only bubble. This is the one I need.
Right, and even my spouse, he's just decided to stay home with my boys just so that we limit our exposure. There's another bubble I think is really interesting that talks about it for those of you that have younger kids, especially our kids that don't have any interaction. They talked about trying to reach out to maybe 1 or 2 families that have similar kids in age, and you can also create like a family type of social bubble, which I thought was really interesting, especially if schools aren't going to be going live. Reaching out right now and trying to put a feeler out there and ask our friends if you don't have anyone. I know I've heard some discussions. I don't know anybody else that has young children like me. I don't know anyone, but trying to put some feelers. Ask your friends, hey, do you know anybody else? And start reaching out, maybe text messaging and seeing that. Having our kids also have some type of social interaction outside of their lovely parents, trust me, I think that they need it. You know, my kids are older. They're using video games, which I don't love, but I've been reading about that. That's their social interaction. Like that's my way of keeping them safe, of being distant. But if you have smaller kids, like the old-fashioned play dates, I think, meeting up, you know, at a park, but you know, making sure that you know that your family that you're meeting with has the same kind of rules that you have for your family. That's what's totally important. And I thought that was a really good tip, Deanza, that we're not doing with our kids, and I wanted to share with anyone. So has anyone, now that we've kind of talked about what a social bubble is and how it's useful to both Deanza and I for our sanity, has anybody else created like a social bubble or a pod without knowing about it? No? And you can put it in a Dropbox. Is everyone pretty much just kind of isolating and doing your own thing? Is that what you all are doing? I'm seeing a couple of heads nodding up and down. And, you know, and we hope that these lunchtime ones, I know they're kind of quick and stuff. I hope that you all feel like this is a good way to reach out as well. I mean, you do realize, I mean, when you're stuck in the same place, seeing the same people, the same walls, doing the same thing, it does get a little boring. But hopefully, I mean, you might consider a quarantine bubble. There's a lot of articles. There's a lot of, you know, being lawyers, I know some of us want to have like outlines, and you'll be like, let me do my interview list with you. Now, as a family, what do you do? I mean, that could be something you do. But if not, it could just be reaching out to others in your community. But we have definitely found it to be extremely, extremely helpful. Like I said, I have my family social bubble, and that's also kind of challenging too with extended family. I mean, mine is extremely limited, really. It's my mom. I really don't see my sister who lives in town. We're trying to stay away. Deanza, what are you doing with your family?
Well, no, I was just going to let you know we hit time.
Oh, sorry. I thought you raised your hand.
No, and that we want to make sure we leave some time for questions. But I think something to be mindful of is there's a whole new set of, and this is something that I'm thinking, there's a whole new set of social norms that's happening in this time of quarantine, and and I went, I couldn't wait to go out. I don't cook really, so I couldn't wait to go out to eat. But and I remember, and my friend said, "Oh, don't post that on Facebook because I don't want to be shamed." There's some shaming, it's really interesting. But I have to say that having strategies like this in place, so being proactive about it, is going to save, at least for and all of us are different, right? We each have different needs. And maybe for you, it's carving out some alone time. Maybe it's whatever, and I'd like to hear some strategies that you've used to cope. But I could tell you, if I just had to hang out with my parents and my daughter all the time, I couldn't. I have to have that sort of, that social fix, that interaction, and the Zoom piece was not going to cut it for another 6 months. So, so I just wanted to say, so we're sort of navigating these norms, and as part of that, to be upfront and to be the one to say, okay, guys, we have to have an agreement in place about how we're going to do this and what it looks like and who's at risk and what that means. And if you do it, and you do it in a way that people can feel comfortable, Cheryl and I have a mutual friend, and he doesn't go anywhere. Like we're consistently inviting him, and he's declining, and we politely, okay, you can decline as much as you want. You can accept when you want. The norms are changing a little bit, and it's about risk management, and I think that's really important. So I'm going to be quiet here for a minute, and let's see if we can answer some of these questions or hear from you about some of your ideas.
Right, Deanza, I think we were talking, we had Megan share with us about the family bubble, and I think the family one's fine. I think the family one's, it's about calculated risk. I mean, even when I go to the grocery store, I've tried to limit it to once a week. I think you all agree. Sometimes, especially in the beginning, when it was like full on terror, right? You put on your mask and you're like, I'm going out to shop for my family, and you're just there, and it was like all the stress. That's gone down a little bit, and we all choose where we want to shop or how we shop, whether it's pickup or whatever. These are calculated risks, and I think that's what's happening. And we're all intelligent women. We need to figure out how much risk is acceptable for us if we know what the consequence is, but also balancing self-care and the mental health piece. And so, in closing, just so you all know, I think that's what's really important. I think that's what's not being spoken about. And when we talked about the Committee on Women in Legal Profession, we think that there's a stigma. We're trying to be these super women, super moms, super lawyers, super everything, and that's really taking a toll on all of us. And so saying that, hey, I need something other than your family, your spouse, your children, it's perfectly fine. And trying to figure that out. The first time Deanza and I and another friend met, that one that was kind of like on the fly, we ended up talking, I think, for like several hours. We thought it was gonna be a quick 1 hour thing, just laughing and being outside in the sun with our own little snacks and drinks. It felt like, like in school, like your little lunch or something. And then we were like thinking about, we can't drink too much because then we don't want to use a restroom, and we don't want to like compromise or put anybody aside. We actually were laughing so much and having such a great time. Nobody even thought about using the restroom or anything. And it was several hours later. And so that just, I don't know, there's something that's missing about that doesn't happen in Zoom meetings. So does anybody else want to share or ask questions? I mean, where is everyone from? I mean, are you guys having a hard time trying to find people? Is it something you guys are? How about this in the chat? Who thinks that they might try this and try to find somebody to social bubble with? Would anybody be willing to try it, or are you still is this too risky for you? Let's see. Is anyone saying that? I know Megan's sharing that she likes to get together with their family, which I love. Would anybody try it? I know you guys are sitting there going, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. And that's okay too.
I'll speak up about my bubble that I don't like to admit to for the reasons that you said. People tend to judge it whenever they know about it. But I live in a cul-de-sac, and there are 2 other families in my bubble, and I have 2 girls, 9 and 7. Another family has a girl that's 10, and another has 2 that are 4 and 8. And those 5 girls have been in a bubble since March, and they play outside all day, and we community parent because I don't know how I would have done certain things without it. Like, have these meetings right now, my daughter's playing with the neighbor girl.
Right.
And the other daughter's playing with the other neighbor girl. So it's a family bubble of 3 families, and it's been us this whole time.
That's great. And Ellen, when you started though, did you even think about this concept, or is it just organically, was it natural?
It was natural. These girls have played together their whole lives. We've lived in, well, at least, most of their lives. We've lived here 5 years. But we've become more open about it in the last few weeks that this has been our survival method. Because I think we didn't know how to admit it to other people that this is what we were doing.
That's a great point. It's kind of shameful. That's exactly it. Because you're like, what I think as lawyers, we like rules. We're like, oh my gosh, are we breaking the rules? And it's funny when we're thinking about that too. It's like, how many people can we invite? And you're like, okay, let's keep it under 5 because we don't want to, and it's all these weird kind of things. But I think naturally people gravitate to that. So if you live in a neighborhood, I mean, what better way? Your kids are playing. It's almost like going back to what happened, decades ago when people used to just play outside and do stuff because they have to. There's no camps, there's nothing else. And we're like, yes, please go outside until it gets dark so mom can have some sanity. Or mom, Ellen can do some work or have a meeting. Now that's great. And I also hear, a couple of you are saying that you're a homebody and you're perfectly capable of being that. And, I'm like that too. My boys, ironically, don't really want to go anywhere and do anything. And that's something I'm trying to find somebody like a psychologist to join us, because that does worry me a little bit. I love it because it's, as a mama, I love protecting him, and they're like, you're not exposed. I'm glad my teenager's not like arguing with me that he wants to go out with his friends. They are perfectly content. My husband said, we've made our home way too welcoming for our children. They have everything they need and they don't want to go out, which is great. But in a weird sense, if we think about that, our kids need some kind of social interaction. That really is not healthy in a lot of ways. And we don't want to create paranoia. That's my other thing. My little one is going to go to middle school, and he suddenly started to be really paranoid. And he's a lawyer's son. So he's like, Mom, if the option's there for me not to go to school, I'm not going to go. And he's starting to be really adamant. And I think it's because he's afraid of making that jump, that leap, and he's been contained and he feels safe here. But, I'm trying to figure out some tools like, how do I encourage my child and not say force him, but make him go to school if it's 2 days at the beginning of August, if it opens up, so that he knows and gets that fear out of his mind. The unknown's always scarier. We all remember going to school, the first day of school, not knowing. I'm trying to figure that out. So if anyone has suggestions on who we can invite, I'd love to know that, because I do think working with our kids and thinking about it, I love keeping them. But I've read all these studies that we may actually be emotionally, keeping them from growing, and can create bigger issues years from now because they're going to be afraid to leave our home. And what are we going to do then when things are, quote, normal? So there's so many different dynamics going on with this. Deanza?
Yeah, Patty, there were a couple things, and some of you were on the first chat and that weren't on this. One is that as attorneys, we like to do everything excellently, and we have to kind of like be able to dial back our own sort of perfectionism in this time. And that's hard, right? And I think that talking and having community in that space is really, really important. But one thing I wanted to share, and the reason I wanted to share this as a tactic and as a strategy for all of you, is because my daughter is going to feed off of my energy. I have a 9-year-old Ellen, a little girl, and if I'm stressed out, if I'm angry, if I'm feeling that, she's gonna sense that. So this is part of me keeping myself healthy and happy and mentally sane. And people are doing it. I mean, I don't know how you get through this just staying home. Now, some people, they can thrive in that environment, but as a mom, and I know Jensen's online, she says she has a family bubble. I mean, literally, it was to the point where I had to like have something to do to make me want to comb my hair. I mean, now Cheryl goes to work every day. I'm not literally, if I didn't have to, we wouldn't leave the house because I get to work from home and I don't have to do anything. But this is helping keep me mentally really sort of focused and still a little bit normal, so I can create that normalized environment for my daughter. And I don't know how many of you saw, there was an article about a little boy in the southeast part of New Mexico. I think he was 11 years old, and he committed suicide. I mean, this, to me, that just shook me to my core. Because, and I thought, well, what in the world? How in the world could that happen? But that happens, you guys. It's a reality of, and that's like sort of like an extreme from what Patty was saying, but that's the reality of this situation. So we have to be able to stay healthy as parents and as mothers. And it's true. The bulk of the parenting, the house, maintaining the house, it tends to fall on the female, on the mother. And we're responsible for the mental health of our children, on top of working, folks, like on top of our external facing responsibility. So having some things to keep you sane and to keep you feeling healthy, I'll tell you, this bubble, the quarantine bubble that has been created, is something for me to look forward to. It creates optimism. It feeds me and my needs, but it may not be that for you. It may be something else, but there's a way to do it. And the one thing I would say, like for the folks that are doing sort of neighborhood collaborative sort of co-parenting in the pandemic, which I think is a great strategy because you're right there, is make sure to have some formal communication about the rules, right? Like, okay, maybe you already are doing that, and we tend to do that as lawyers anyway. But I think, it wouldn't hurt to just say, okay, well, we need to make sure let's talk about where we've been so that we can do sort of that risk calculation, even because I think that the risk I think we're going to see some changes over the next few weeks as this pandemic continues.
I agree, Deanza, and I know we're running a little bit short of time, and I thank everyone for on the comments. Some of you say you might think about it, some of you are already kind of doing it, but yeah, I think that this is definitely a tip or a tool, because it comes down to mental health for us and our families, our kids, really is super, super important. And I hope that, just starting your Mondays with us. I know that we're not necessarily a wealth of information, we're just sharing, and I think that's what the value is. So for those of you, please invite others to join with us. I love seeing your faces. That makes me happy. It's also like, I know that some of us say we don't do our hair and stuff, but it doesn't matter. We're all at different stages. Just being able to see other women that we know are like nodding your heads, we're going, okay, it makes, at least me and Deanza, and I know Cheryl's on, Jensen's on, the four of us that are kind of leading this, make us think, okay, this is a worthwhile endeavor, because sometimes we just don't talk about it. And it's okay to talk about challenges. And, I think that all female attorneys I run into in New Mexico, whether we get along or not, they're all phenomenal women. So I think we can learn from each other. So if there's helpful hints, please feel free to share them. Reach out to any of us. So again, really quickly, the four of us that are going to be leading these chats are myself, Deanza, who's with us, Deanza Valencia, Cheryl Saavedra, who is with us in our first one, and Jensen Wallace. And so if you want, please reach out to any of us individually and let us know, hey, I really want you guys to talk about this topic. We'd love suggestions. We're trying to figure out what we know, and that doesn't mean that what we know is the only thing that's happening to all of you. We want these to be useful and worthwhile. So we're going to have them every other Monday. So our next Law Mom chat for everyone will be on Monday, July the 20th. I think Cheryl's going to be leading that. I'm not sure what topic she's choosing yet, but that'll be our next one. And again, if you know any other women that can't join us, you can always view them on our YouTube channel, which is kind of scary. It's kind of, a little viral thing, but we thought it was good. Just going live. If you can't make it, please join in the conversation and stuff. And with that, I think we're pretty much out of time. If there's any other questions or any other comments before we leave, does anybody have anything else they'd like to share?
I just want to say thank you guys for coming on, for sharing and being willing to share, and know that I think we're facing unprecedented times, and I think it's going to continue to shift. And I think one thing I think we need to be talking about, and eventually as we move forward, is what school is going to look like. Because I think that I hate to even make plans right now, because I think it's going to change, and we may have to come up with some unique strategies, because I don't think we can do this another semester. My daughter's a third grade dropout, so I think we need to figure out what it's going to look like, and maybe that's something we can do as a community. And appreciate this forum, and thanks, Patty, for leading it.
Sure. Thanks so much, everyone, and thanks again to Morgan at the State Bar for allowing us to have this. I think it's really important. So if you guys keep liking it, send us some ideas, and we'll keep trying to do these as much as we can, and just having dialogue, and just know you're not alone. We're all facing challenges, and we're phenomenal, strong women that made it as far as we are. We will survive this, and I'm so glad to have this little community, and thank you all for giving up a little bit of your lunch hour, and we will see you in 2 weeks. So thanks, everyone.
Have a good one, you guys.